everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to bring you some more recommendations for books that would be great for high school readers. And we will just jump right in.
Awesome. The Girls Ive Been is a really good thriller mystery. If you're wanting something really twisty that you're trying to figure out as you read it, this one's perfect for you. So Nora's mother is a con artist, and she has raised her under different names and personalities, essentially training her to also pull heists and of all kinds. Usually it is about targeting rich men and taking everything they have, essentially. That's what her mother is really good at. It's been 5 years since Nora's had to think that way. She is almost graduating college or high school, and she is living with her half sister, Lee, who is kind of taking care of her. She's going through therapy. I will give you a warning, it was really traumatic, her upbringing, and you learn more and more about it throughout the book. So there is a bit of child abuse in it as well. But it all comes rushing back, all of that training that she had with her mother, when her girlfriend Iris and her ex-boyfriend Wes and her go into a bank to deposit money for a school fundraiser that they were doing, and they get caught up in a bank robbery. So Nora's mind instantly goes from tactic to tactic, what she was trained to use in order to stay one step ahead of these robbers. She's trying to figure the situation out. She has not told Iris all of the situations that she's been in about her past. That's coming in to play as they're having it. So that's a little bit of an awkward part for her, because she needs to be deceitful. She needs to kind of keep one step ahead of tactics. Like at one point she crawls through the roof to get into another room to throw them off, and stuff. So there's different things like that. Wes, her ex-boyfriend, knows a bit more about her history. They've connected on that level. Several of them do have difficult backgrounds you learn about during this. But when they get put into this one room, they realize the child that's in the room with them is actually the bank manager's daughter. And so they're super aware of the level that they are dealing with. They have pretty much the biggest asset in the bank as far as they're concerned. So now they're in hyper mode, really trying to figure out how to protect this one person, how to get everyone out alive, and see what they can do. So through all of this, they're learning about each other and learning how to make this happen. So see what happens, see if Nora has enough, and find out other people Nora has been, if Nora's even her real name. It's very twisty. It's very interesting. I really like it, but also Nora does have a secret in her back pocket that no one really knows. And when she reveals it, it's pretty much a game changer. So if you're interested in those thriller mysteries, The Girls Ive Been is a good one for you.
Ever After is a graphic novel that is about the zombie apocalypse. And I picked it up because I thought the art and the cover was kind of beautiful and really not like most zombie graphic novel art I've seen before. And the art throughout is gorgeous. This was a book that was originally published in Germany, and it's set in Germany as well. And so this version is a translated version. It's been translated to English. And it follows two main characters, Vivi and Eva, who kind of live in this post the zombie apocalypse has happened, right? And they're living in the world after, in the after, where the zombies are all over. And they live in sort of a, I guess you could call it like a fenced in compound, essentially, is where they live. So the zombies are on the outside, they're on the inside. But they've been dealing, both of them have been dealing with some different stuff. And at the very beginning of the story, they end up escaping, essentially leaving the compound where they are on this train, this cargo train, that's sort of automated, and they're kind of stowed away on it, and it's going to another location, another city. But partway there, it breaks down, stops operating, and so they are stuck between, like, out in the exposed area between these safe zones, and they've got to try and survive and make it. And this has a lot of the, like, if you're familiar with zombie stories, right, there's a lot of the tropes about zombie stories. It is fairly gory. Lots of lots of characters end up dead. Zombies bite them and eat them, and a lot of zombies get also killed in various ways. So know that. But it is a fascinating story about kind of survival and also about the kind of the mental health toll that kind of living in this apocalypse takes on people, and the kind of regret and the fear that kind of eats your life when you're trying to survive in this type of world. So it's an interesting mixture, and it is not, I will say, it is not a happy story, but it is a really interesting story, and I highly recommend it for the art, if nothing else. So.
Heiress apparently is a great choice if you like romantic comedies. If you were a fan of Crazy Rich Asians, or you are looking for a kind of light, fun romance with a little bit of mystery mixed in. I love this story. The main character is Gemma. She's Chinese American, and she's on her gap year between her graduating from high school and starting college. And she has moved out to LA, and she's determined to try to make a career in acting. That's particularly difficult in, LA is a hard scene, lots of starving artists essentially, but she thinks that she has had her big break when she is able to land the lead role in a movie that's going to be filmed, that's an adaptation of a very famous Chinese play in Butterfly. And so she is so excited. However, she discovers that filming is going to happen on location in Beijing. And the one thing that her mother has always told her is that she is never allowed to travel to Beijing. She will not tell her why. She doesn't know what has gone on in her mom's past to keep her from returning to China or allowing her daughter to go. But she decides she's going to defy her mom. She's going to travel to Beijing to film this movie because it's going to be her big break. And as soon as she lands in the airport, she is mobbed by paparazzi, even though she's nobody, like nobody knows her. She's not famous. This is the first role she's had. She doesn't understand what's going on until she sees some tabloids for a celebrity that's like a rich heiress in Beijing that she looks almost identical to. And what you discover really quickly is that this heiress is her cousin. And we start to learn about Gemma's mother's past and what she might have been hiding. Her mother came from a very rich family, and she was cast out and left, but you don't learn why right at the beginning. And so this is a really fun story. There's the elements of, like, if you like film or you're interested in going into acting, there's a whole lot about what it's like to be on set for a movie. But then there's also the mystery element. She's trying to figure out what's going on with her mother. She's starting to fall in love with this young man from a family who has been feuding with her mother's family for generations. All of this twist together. It's such a fun story. I highly recommend it.
These Violent Delights is a really good fantasy historical retelling of Romeo and Juliet set in the 1920s in Shanghai. It is fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. So there's two gangs that essentially run the town of Shanghai. The Chinese Scarlet Gang, who is like top notch. They literally rule everything. The police, everyone pretty much you report to someone in the Chinese Scarlet Gang. And then their rivals are the Russian White Flowers, who always are battling the Scarlets. I will warn you, it's a very violent, pretty bloody, graphic book, because most of the time they are battling. So just up front, if that's not your cup of tea, you might skip on this one. But it does follow Juliet, who is returning from New York City because she's going to start training with her father because she's the heir to the Scarlet Gang. And she is feared right away. She instantly has the power of the name behind her. People know who she is just seeing her come in. It's very intense, her presence in a room. And then there's Roma, who is the heir to the White Flowers. And he's been training for a while with his father, but they have some history from when they were younger. Before they knew about the rivals, they knew each other as kids, and they were pretty fond of each other, often played, and just kind of were each other's first crushes. And what's happened now, though, is since then, Roma betrayed Juliet really bad, and it ended up killing lots of Scarlet Gang members. And so she is instantly cannot be friends with him anymore. Obviously, it was a huge betrayal, one of the reasons she did go back to New York City was because of that. And so now that she's back, she is taking control, but something is taking control of people. They're not sure what it is. It's suspected to be this little bug that is getting inside people's brains and making them do acts of violence on themselves. It seems like they're going crazy. It gets super gory again. Gore factor is pretty high. They're literally pulling out their like throats and essentially bleeding out. Full warning. But it's in different places and it's affecting both gangs equally. And so they've decided they have to work together to figure out what's happening before there isn't anyone on either side. It's everyone, even outside of the gangs. It's just randomly happening in places. And they don't know how contagious it is. They don't know much about it, but what they do know is that it has affected his sister, Roma's sister, and they were able to somehow catch her before she fully took control. They seized her arms back. So now they have her sedated and they're studying her, trying to figure out what is going on, what is happening. So see if they can get to the bottom of what is happening to both their gangs, to these people. And it's phenomenal. I super enjoyed it. So that's These Violent Delights.
So I'm going to talk about Bonds of Brass, which is a book that's it's marketed for an adult audience, but I think it has a really good crossover appeal for teen readers. And if you like sci-fi, or if you like stories that kind of grip you and won't let you go, this is the type of book where I think people will either really love it or you'll want to throw the book across the room. It's one of those. I really liked it. I was in the first camp, but I have seen some other people who've read it who feel the other way. And it's about two best friends who are enrolled in a military academy. I believe they're like 17. They're not quite 18 yet. But these two guys are best friends. And at the very beginning of the book, some stuff happens. I don't want to be spoilery, but something happens, and the characters kind of realize, one of the characters realizes that his best friend is actually the heir, sort of like the blood heir to this empire, this evil empire, if you want to think of it that way, that kind of conquered years before. I think it's like 7 years before they came in and conquered a series of planets, another, I guess you could think of them as kingdoms, like space kingdoms, whatever. So the two friends end up on the run to try and keep the heir kid alive, and this story kind of follows them on this adventure. It's got all sorts of things in it that I think work really well. If this is the type of story where the characters are at the heart of the story and really get you invested in what's going on. And so these best friends, they are starting to maybe fall in love with one another. There's some bisexual representation and some other different rep in this story, and they end up teaming up with a street kid, this street kid named Wen, and she uses a deadly umbrella as her weapon of choice. And there's this kind of breakneck adventure. Like every few pages, something is happening. The story is jumping forward, and this is the first in a trilogy, so it doesn't quite leave you on a cliffhanger. I wouldn't call it a cliffhanger, but it does leave you with a lot of the threads. Like there's mystery stuff going on and other things. It does leave you with a lot of those threads unresolved, and it's pretty clear in the next story there's going to be more folding out. I can't recommend this enough. If you are somebody who likes stories where the romance part of the story is kind of both wonderful and also awful at the same time, this is one of those books, and I think you might want to give it a try.
Sanctuary is a near future dystopian that feels uncannily plausible. It is set in 2032, and the premise is that at that point, which is technically only 11 years from now, all citizens have been chipped and they are tracked in everything that we do. And Valley is the 16-year-old main character of our story, and she is an undocumented immigrant. She and her mother came from Colombia when she was a baby, and they crossed into the United States, and her younger brother was born in the United States. So he is a citizen and he is fine, but she and her mother had to get black market chips put into their arm. And that does mean that they don't always work in the way that they are supposed to. And the story kind of picks up when the government agency called the Deportation Forces is mobilized, and it creates chaos throughout the country to the point that California decides to secede from the Union to become, as the title implies, a sanctuary for any undocumented immigrants. But the deportation forces are rounding people up, and you never hear from them again. Once they're taken, they're gone. And so this is the story of Vali and her family going on the run. Her mother has the contact information for a nun. They live in Vermont currently, and she has the contact information for a nun who lives in New York City that she's supposed to connect with, who is supposed to have information about how they can get to sanctuary, how they can get to California. But as they're boarding one of the buses to get to New York, her mother's chip malfunctions and she's taken. And so now Vali and her little brother are on their own, and they have to try to make their way across the country. This is a heartbreaking story because of, even though it's technically near future dystopian, how real it feels, how plausible it feels. It truly does feel like it's ripped from the headlines. And I actually read an interview with the authors that talked about how, as they were writing it, they would write something that they think would be completely outlandish and definitely something that would fit in a sci-fi or dystopian novel, and then they would see a headline about that very thing the next day. So if you're looking for something that is intense, it's quite violent, but it is something that will keep you thinking about it long after you've finished reading that sanctuary. Those are all the books that we have for you. We hope that you have found something that sparks your interest and that you're excited to check out. And we will see you again soon. Have a nice afternoon.
Bye.